Hi, welcome. My name is Earl McCarthy. I'm actually the sales director here at ActiveProspect, and we are in for another exciting webinar that's lined up in the ActiveProspect webinar universe, Scaling Legal Marketing with Confidence Through Compliance. And today I have my guest panel with me, Cason Carter, and I have Andy Northcutt, and I'll have them introduce themselves before we dive in.
Yeah, I'm Cason Carter. I'm with Broughton Partners and also president of National Legal Vendors Association. Broughton Partners, we specialize in mass tort marketing, intake, and referrals for those mass tort cases to qualified legal counsel across the nation. And so really all-in-one solution and primarily focused on mass torts, and excited for today. Very important topic.
Thank you.
Andy Northcutt, VP of Business Development for Legal Brand Marketing. I've been in legal marketing for about 20 years now. At Legal Brand, we do 100% lead gen, leads and calls across multiple verticals. So anything from MVA and workers' compensation to DUI, estate planning, employment laws are a new one, family law, tax debt, you name it. We just keep adding. So,
perfect. Thank you for that introduction, guys. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. There's a chat icon and a question icon. Please use the chat section for general comments and interactions. And other participants, please use the question section for questions. Also, be on the lookout for a few poll questions this session to help shape with the discussion. We will leave time at the end to review and to respond. And lastly, a link of today's recording will be emailed out tomorrow morning for reference and sharing with your colleagues. Let's dive in. So the first thing that we really want to address is, how did we get here as a legal marketing ecosystem, from benches to TV to radio to ping post to AI? How is legal marketing shaping up, and how is that progressing as more and more law firms are moving into a digital landscape? And I don't know if,
I can start off by telling you where we started, or at
yes,
least
let's talk about
in my mind. So, I mean, flashback to 2005, 2006, you used to be able to go onto Google, put up some ads, say, hey, talk to a lawyer. Nobody was doing it. You could probably create a lead for a couple bucks, or you could. High intent, didn't have to worry too much about fraud, no saturation. Flash forward to, let's say, 8 months after that, it wasn't years, to where you had to rely on affiliate marketing. You had to team up with some organic. People had good organic presence. Terms on Google were suddenly the most expensive things you could do. Everyone caught on. And, now we're here. I mean, Cason, if you want to say, what happened between then and now, I mean, this could be a long conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one way to look at it too is the legal industry is very is still in a very infancy stage when it comes to marketing. If you look at other industries, lawyers were not able to advertise for a long time. I mean, I wasn't around when they first were able to advertise, but there had to be a rapid progression and rapid maturity in this space. And I think that the legal field in general is still behind on that. Since I have entered the field, I've seen the transfer from 60 to 70% television to now it's 80% digital on most campaigns, but every campaign's different. I don't want to say that TV does not have a place, because it really does. But it has certainly changed. For example, when we started in 2017, 90% of the leads that we fielded were phone calls. Today, we only field 20% of incoming leads as phone calls. And so I think that since 2017 to today, that just shows you the progression that we're under. And you'll even notice with TV, people are going from TV to your website to then fill out a form, or then to call from your website from commercials. And so it just kind of shows you the digital presence that is there. And I think the legal industry has still maturing when it comes to advertising for sure, compared to other industries at least.
Well, that's good. Thank you. Well, I think with that, let's go to our first poll question. And the first poll question is, what is your biggest challenge with web-based lead generation? And you can see the votes coming in. So it looks like driving quality traffic to our site has the about 38%. Coming in second is compliance with regulations, TCPA, CCPA, etc. And the last with 25% converting visitors into leads.
Do you want us to talk on those, Earl?
Yeah, we can actually definitely just let's do a deeper dive into some of the metrics as they come in terms of driving qualified traffic to your sites. What would you say is some of the challenges in driving qualified traffic to legal websites?
And you want to start? You probably have more expertise.
Well,
in this
I
area.
mean, the challenges on the front end is there's lots of regulation in terms of what you can and can't say, especially when you're regulated by each state bar. So, you can't say, we're going to solve all your problems, or we're going to make it rain money and your case is going to settle for, X amount. And that's just in the contingency space. So, any sort of marketing hook that you can think of to try to get somebody to come to a site, a lot of times you can't even say that. That and just the attention span of people and the fact that you've got to be omni-channel now is that, sure, you pull them in, but you've got to pull them in maybe 10 or 11 other times, or have some sort of presence outside of just even that lead gen form where they can look you up and have some validity there. And, before they would even make a decision to hire you. So it's just, it's not even necessarily that first form fill. It's the whole ecosystem that's involved there. But I'd say for sure, and what you can and can't say, has a huge impact on driving traffic even to the page itself, let alone the form fill. So.
Yeah. And Andy, would you say also brand presence also plays a huge factor too, as well, with a law firm? Like when you think about, most of the major, if we're looking at, motor vehicle accidents, we
Sure.
tend to know like the big players in the space, because they have, larger ad spends and marketing presence, people tend to gravitate towards those larger firms because of their brand awareness. That also helps.
Yeah, I think it might help them pull the trigger on conversion, but I think, you definitely have a level playing field as long as you have some sort of social media presence. If you have a good website, if you have, just a presence across all channels, if they can see your firm, they can see testimonials, all sorts of things like that, is that you're sure brand might have something to do with it. But if they know a brand and they're in, let's say they got in an accident and they've been pounded by ads in their local market, they might just call that law firm directly. So if they're going onto the online ad and following through, they may not have a brand in mind already. So, but you do need to make sure that you have all those other channels covered, because they are going to look you up. I mean, to Cason's point of saying that there's 80% form fills, a lot of people just don't pick up the phone and they're not dialing and things like that, but they are checking everything through their digital devices and it's right in their hand. And so they're going to check to make sure that, you're a legitimate attorney, that you've done cases, things like that. And so the form fill is just one piece of it. You need to have all the other things in check too, to convert the lead. So,
right. And let's just talk about compliance and regulations, because I know that also came up in the poll and that had a 33% answer rate. What do you think are some of the things in terms of, compliance and regulations that's really impacting, law firms on a whole as they look to, scale in the digital ecosystem?
So look, the legal field is a very interesting field when it comes to TCPA, I think, and probably the added complexity that it adds in protecting one's bar card makes this topic seem overwhelming. I'll tell you the rule we follow that I think really helps, and our compliance committee has come up with this, and that is, look, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act was established to regulate telemarketing and telephone solicitation, outbound telephone solicitation, okay? That doesn't mean that's the only thing it regulates, unfortunately, though, but that's why it was started for. And that's the main purpose of it. And so when you think about it from a lawyer standpoint, they can't solicit, they can't outbound call. And so the way we like to look at it is follow the ethical responsibility of your bar when it comes to advertising first and foremost, and get those principles in place. Then look at the TCPA laws and follow the ones that are applicable. And you'll be able to follow a pattern that you'll see a lot of them are already accomplished by the fact that you follow your bar laws and your standards for your bar card. And I think it's just a lot easier way to look at it. Protect your bar license. And I'm not saying advertise until both things are done, but when you're, as a process, follow the ethical responsibilities you have to the bar and to protect yourself and your bar card. Then look at the TCPA laws. And when you're doing the things that you should for the bar, you'll see that there's a lot of laws in the TCPA laws that you can say done, check, or I can't do that anyway because of my bar license. And it makes it a lot simpler to look at that way, because I know for a long time we had trouble with, well, how does this apply here? And it's, you really got to just look at it from my standpoint. The easiest way we look at it, and the most efficient way, is to do it in that process. And I really think that will help a lot of people out.
Yeah, and understand too that within TCPA, it's not just the FCC. I mean, with that recent case of the McLaughlin Chiropractic, McKesson, is that now it's up to the districts too, or the districts can interpret the TCPA, within each state. And so you might have an attorney, let's say they're in California, because of AI and all this technology and everything rolling up. Now they're expanding to Nevada and Arizona and things like that. And what they're used to in California might be different in the other states that they're expanding to too. So you need to know that, within each district, it can have stricter restrictions as well. So they need to pay attention on the state level, not just the national level when it comes to TCPA. Not to mention if they're doing any sort of AI and things like that, that also rolls into the existing TCPA framework. So those calls are the same thing as if they would call themselves. So,
and I think that I know the other things you're referring to, but if we're just talking about calling times, which I think another way to look at that is that I tell firms all the time, follow the state with the least amount of time to call. And then you cover all the other states. If you're having trouble with it, if you're having trouble with your phone system or intake, or not sure how to rein that in, get to there. That allows you to start, and then you can only get more aggressive for there. That's the way I like to approach any compliance matter, is get to that place first, where you have the most restricted call times, and then figure out how to back yourself out of it. And I think that's just a quicker path to getting things done for anybody looking at this.
Yeah, and I think the general rule is, I guess it's called quiet hours, right? So it's anything outside of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., the local time of wherever you're marketing.
That's right. You got to follow
in general, time. You'll be okay there. So
right.
If you want just some sort of, hey, I want to be ultra conservative and things like this, like go by that, you're typically going to be in the safe area.
One state has 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And so I think that's Florida, but you're right. But the time zone does matter. And so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Especially if you're calling on cell phones where somebody may, it gets very tricky there. I mean, I've got a Chicago cell phone and I live in Seattle, so watch out. So
yeah. So moving along. So lead generation in the modern world, exciting and lots of opportunities. When you think of all of the opportunities, ability to operate at scale, marketing more strategically, optimizing ad spend and bolstering your ROI, using technology to enable your growth. And with all that being said, what are some of the marketing channels you have seen that are effective in the legal space for generating leads outside of the traditional spaces that we covered?
can speak a little bit to this. I mean, socials for sure is just coming on so strong, but you with that also you could have a lower intent lead because simply by the ease of opting in or talking to somebody, that you can do auto form fills if they're on a device or something like that, and they say yes, and it auto populates their name into the form, and then they can answer some of the questions or something that are related. And so just by the ease of contact, sometimes that can lean toward a less quality lead, and so you're just working through that. But it's also just a great, people will spend hours every day. I don't know what I think it's something like 2.5 hours or something the average individual on a daily basis spends on social media. So you got to be there. But something more creative is that think further up funnel. So let's say that I'm doing bankruptcy marketing or something like that, which is more of like the CARP, and it's sitting there in the debt side at the bottom level is, what happens to somebody before that, which leads them toward bankruptcy? Did they try a debt settlement program? Did they try debt management, credit counseling, or something like that? Get some touch points up there, maybe through those companies and their marketing, help them curb their marketing expenses by, marketing for bankruptcy within that sort of channel. And you can think higher level like that to get onto the roadmap of that consumer. So,
yeah. And Andy, when you touch on social, are you talking specifically about Meta, IG, TikTok, where you're seeing, which I'm seeing a lot more legal?
We see a lot in Meta. I'm sure Cason in particular in torts probably sees a ton of Meta. Cason, did you have a point there?
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the last poll question a little bit because I think it comes into this, but when talking about driving quality traffic, but it does play right into this. And so I just want to set the stage with this is when you're talking about driving quality leads to your website, I think the premise has to come into play. You can't measure what you can't, or you can't manage what you can't measure. And so if you're not measuring all ads coming into your website, and you got to think at your website, if you just break it down to how did convenience stores before the internet advertise, or how did a store advertise before these times, is think of the store as the hub. That's going to be your website, right? And then am I putting a sign out on the street corner? And how do I know if that's driving people to me? And that's the way you have to approach it with social. You have to approach it with Google. You have to be able to track what's driving traffic, what's converting. And when you're looking at these things and talking about what Andy was just saying, when you're measuring everything to a T, and you know exactly what is driving traffic your direction, and there's a lot of tools out there nowadays that help with this, but I'm a big believer. Half of everybody's marketing is wasted. Not everybody's. Half of most companies' marketing is wasted, and they don't know which half. And when you think about that, that's something we really live and die on, is making sure we can track everything. And so when you're talking about the exciting new things that are out there, old mediums still work, is what I'll tell you. Now, we drive a ton from Meta, but we try to back ourselves into every campaign by saying, where am I going to have eyeballs for this demographic? And so if you're looking for a Roundup claim, where are people with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that used Roundup going to be? Where are their eyeballs going to be? And how do I get their attention? And so I think if you follow the approach of making sure you can measure everything, and then you look at all the exciting things that are out there, also keep in mind that the old mediums that worked before still work. They're cheaper now. And it's about quality eyeballs. And so when you measure everything and you're measuring everything that comes in the door, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions on where to optimize, where am I putting my next dollar, when you know what's working. But I agree with Andy, you got to be creative, but you got to be measuring to be creative, because if I'm creative and I don't know whether it's working or not, then it's kind of worthless to me.
Yeah. Right. And you've got to optimize on case conversion. So,
yes,
a lot of times too, when we deal with law firms too, we deal with law firms across the country, is they might say, hey, this campaign had this lead, and, it was a bad lead, for whatever reason it was. And they'll say, is there a way to just rip that out of my current lead flow or something like that? And so like now we're acting on one instance of one lead, and it's usually 99 times out of 100. Usually that same path is what's responsible for most of their cases too. And so you're actually optimizing against your ROI if you're acting on this anecdotal type stuff or these one-offs or this one experience or something like that. And so the more case conversion details are provided to the marketer, the better, because they can optimize off of that as opposed to, some sort of experience. I mean, even if you have a site with really good organic ranking, 10% of that traffic on that organic link coming through is going to be fraud. It's not 100% great. And so you always have to optimize off of that. You have to give the case feedback. I'd say 2 out of every 3 law firms that even contact us ask us to API into a platform. And to me, that's a huge opportunity too. A platform meaning like your Litifieds, Clios, like you name it, what have you. They need to have that centralized and have that data so that they can communicate that to the marketer on the front end.
Which you can also use that to track your marketing, right? If you have
Yep.
the platform set up correctly. Hit on the fraud real quick though, Andy, because I think you just made a good point. But I think fraud in this industry, everybody thinks coached fraud, things like that. But when we talk about fraud as marketers, we use it in broader terms. So hit on the what you said on the 10%. Just I want to make sure everybody understands that.
I'm just talking about, just general spam and things like that could be hitting your experience. I mean, there's nothing egregious going on. Well, I mean, certainly there are bad actors out there. I don't want to say there aren't, but there's nothing egregious going on with people running ads and trying to push that onto social media or something. If they get somebody who says, I never fill that out or things like that, it's going to happen. And it's not somebody who they coached and said, hey, pretend like you were in this accident or something. It's, at least the folks that are on the up and up. And that's why, things like ActiveProspect even exist, is that, law firms like marketers, like, Cason and us will use ActiveProspect within all of our lead flow, meaning like lead conduit checks, which we'll get to. But law firms themselves should also be on board with that because they're doing internal marketing. They have, links coming off their social media. Why wouldn't you want a trusted form certificate to have proof of consent for everything? I mean, it's a CYA type environment, right? Cover your ass, do it. So.
Yeah, I think we'll get into this more, but if you don't have a trusted form on every web form, I think you're making a big mistake. I would just tell you.
Yeah, a huge mistake. And actually, I did a couple of research on a couple of big law firms, and you go to their contact pages, and some of them have the TCPA disclaimer language on that contact form, and others don't. So yeah, you're just opening up yourself to a lot of inherent risk as it relates to TCPA. So moving on, let's talk about some of the challenges you guys have faced in working with lead vendors in the past, quality, compliance, and consistency. Could you guys talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you have faced with third-party vendors that you have worked with in the legal space?
Yeah, I'll tell you, for us, we don't work with third-party vendors that aren't exclusive to us and now. And we have, most of the time, that is media placement companies. Like, we're not going to build out a media purchasing team for television here that's going to make sense for us, but we use someone that has a large TV buying team, and they are exclusive to us for the legal industry. And I think that you don't have to go that extreme, but you do have to be maniacal in when you work with other people and make sure you're controlling through a good MSA or contract. These are the things we require. This is the disclaimer I require. I need a trusted form to come through on every lead. If you can't get trusted form, you can't work with us. And you got to have your must-haves.
Yep.
And you list out those must-haves. You require they sign it. You require they indemnify you. You require that there are damages if they hurt you. And everybody that we're talking about here is lawyers. You can get that form drawn up. You can do it yourself. You can work with counsel, but make sure you have those things in place and make sure you have your must-haves there. For the people that work with us that are exclusive to us, they have to use our disclaimer. They have to use trusted form. It comes through on every single lead if it's a web lead, and there are no exceptions. And it's a one-strike penalty. If we ever catch them breaking the agreement, they're out, and there's damages in there if they do hurt us.
I love that, Cason. And then also, could you talk about any associations that are out there that legal lead vendors would want to be a part of, or attorneys that would want to be a part of, that they can find qualified vendors that are generating leads compliantly. Can you talk a little bit about any association that, we can actually
Yes.
throw out to any of our
National Legal Vendors Association, which I'm president of, and Earl's on the board with me, is an association where our job is to vet and screen vendors to protect a plaintiff's bar. I think that when you're operating as an attorney under ABA Rule 5.4, anybody that you hire that is a non-attorney is an extension of your bar card at that point. And we have seen cases where attorneys have got into serious trouble, got their bar card suspended, have lost their bar card because they trusted a non-attorney. They did not oversee them properly, and it's the attorney's responsibility to oversee them, and their bar card is on the line. And so National Legal Vendors Association is helping vet vendors and provide that documentation to attorneys so that they have due diligence, or part of their due diligence that they need to have on file started. And we're hitting on the specific questions that attorneys may not know to ask, because it's hard to go in and understand everything about the marketing space and what you should be asking. That's what the association is there for. We're doing it for all types of vendors, med record companies, when it comes to cybersecurity. And it's a really good place if you're an attorney and you want to have a network of pre-screened, pre-vetted vendors and receive documentation. You can join as a member and receive that documentation. But some free guidelines are on our website under industry standards that you can download with some questions that you should be asking the vendors you work with.
Andy, do you want to add anything additional to that before we go to our second poll question?
I think Cason's group's great, especially as you get into space, because, you're talking about a much higher dollar lead, and a lot of exposure to where people are pulling medical records and all sorts of, more personal information, unlike, like a core law area like us, or where we're running like, MBA, things like that. We're never asking for social security number. We're never pulling medical records within the thing. Is that, depending on the sensitive information that you're pulling, it'd be wise to go for somebody who's more vetted, and certainly, to Cason's point of them being an extension of your bar license. Yeah, that's always been true, and so true today too. And just in terms of the bad actors out there that technology is enabling. So,
all right.
Yeah, the last thing I would say on that too, I'm sure Andy will agree, and this is not on NLVA necessarily, but with Andy, when something is cheaper, this is the only industry on earth, I think, where people don't say what's wrong. They think they found a secret weapon.
Yeah.
They think that that they have they found a secret weapon, essentially. And I think that what attorneys have to start asking is, there are cheaper ways to get leads. There are cheaper ways to do things. I can tell you how to go out and get cheaper cases today, but it'll break solicitation rules. You can buy a third-party data list and directly target those. Those things are fine in every other industry. But when you do it in the legal industry, it violates your bar law, and you got to be careful. And so when it's too good to be true, it typically is. And that's just something that attorneys should watch out for.
Yeah, and one TCPA class action lawsuit can wipe out all the years of margin that you just thought you had. And so, I don't know, you can't afford not to be compliant. Basically, is that you can't count your money if you're creating it in the wrong way. So,
yeah, I always say pay now or pay later. Too many times we've had people are coming to us after the fact that they've been sued, and they're looking to try to retain a trusted form certificate, and they were relying on the vendor to, store that record on their behalf. And they didn't realize that it's their responsibility, because they're the ones that doing the outbound dialing, to have the proof of record in hand prior to making that outbound dial. So yeah, definitely.
And you also just can't 100% rely on technology. like ActiveProspect gets you to, like 90% of the way, but you're still going to have some manual processes of checking, we'll dive into this, I'm sure, is, keystrokes and all sorts of just session replays and things like that. Is that, you still have to check everything. You can't just assume that because I have X, Y, and Z, I'm good. So.
Okay, so before we jump into our next poll question, we had some questions that came in from an anonymous user. With platforms like TikTok and Instagram gaining traction, do you see web forms fading or just evolving?
I see every ethical marketing medium out there as being potentially the best for the audience you're looking for. And I don't see them fading, but I do see TikTok being better than the others if your target audience is there. I will tell you that we still run some print ads when we think it's right for the audience we're going after. And so I think all the mediums that are available now will still be there. I think that all these things that are coming into play, all it means is you got to get up to speed on those as well. And then you really got to decide where you need to be placing your ad dollars based on the audience you are looking for. And then measuring it to see if you're right, and then going at it again. And so I don't see them fading. I see a new demographic of users being available in those types of mediums.
Yeah, and all those social media, a lot of the video content and stuff, it's going to eventually link to a lead form at some point, where
That's
they
right.
might even get off of there and just do a direct type in, not even a click through, where they just go type it in on another browser or something like that. And so it's you'll have more form fills, like you'll just have a bigger audience. It's a bigger pool now. So I think it'll grow.
I mean, you think so, but because given the fact that already these social media platforms already have a ton of data on the user, so it would be more advantageous for them to stay within that platform environment, and then they collect all of that data within the ad, as opposed to linking them out to, a web form that you would have a higher drop-off rate in that instance.
I'd say measure that. I don't see that to be the case, and I think it's really hard. I agree with Andy. You want to try to get them on a landing page or website that you can track the cookies. I understand what you're saying, Earl. I think you got to measure it. We have done tests like that and measured it. But you also got to remember, depending on what you're advertising for, especially, and I would encourage the audience to think about this. There's a difference in direct response and brand advertising. And if you're trying to find a marketer out there, don't go down the path that I made mistakes on. Try to find a direct response marketer. Even if they're doing organic play, there's a difference in direct response, organic SEO type plays than your standard SEO type plays. And so I think that those things are important to know, is that you're trying to get someone to move. But if you're trying to educate them and get them to move, a landing page and a website is very helpful to drive them to give them more information. And so I think why we have not seen the same results of the Facebook lead generator is because in a Facebook ad, you can only get so much across. But when you click them through to a landing page that gives them more information, that's the difference in them feeling more comfortable of what they're submitting a form on. That's the reason I do not think we've seen an uptick in conversions on direct Facebook plays. We'll keep testing it, but we have not had any evidence of that yet, Earl, that it's a better play.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what's their motivation for being there? I mean, most times it's to be entertained. And so if you're running some sort of legal ad or something that's, paralleling legal advertising, you still need to entertain them, and then they'll see more of that and they'll follow that. They're not going to keep following it if they just get pitched, hey, talk to an attorney now, look, over and over again. Like, why would they ever follow that? Like it's got to be something that sticks in their mind. And then when that legal situation does occur, like they do get in that motor vehicle accident, they've already been following this guy that's crazy, that's on TikTok, blah, 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 like, hey, I know he hooks up to firms. I'm going to type in his name, or I'll go to him. So you have to approach it a little bit, I guess, more passively or creatively. So,
yeah. All right. So we have just a few more anonymous questions. The next question is, what is a good internal process for evaluating lead vendors or tech partners before actually committing? Cason,
Go to
Andy,
NLBA.
stab at that?
Go to NLBA.law and check out the vendors there. Go there, grab the industry standards. And if you're looking at a marketing company, if you're looking at one of those, there's a lot of questions that will be available to you there. I think it would take a lot of time to go through all the process questions and due diligence that I think, or Andy would think you need to use. There are questions there that you can use, though, would be my best advice.
Yeah, and it really depends on the channel. So, I mean, if you're contacting, let's say, an SEO company and they're asking for, $50,000 down or something like that, that could make sense because they're building something that has a longer tail. They need that commitment and things like that. But if you're contacting your average lead generator, again, it depends, the price of lead or what size firm they are and things like that. But if you can't lean in with some sort of month-to-month contract, low value or not low value, low increments in terms of your spend to ease into that and to prove that out, it's probably not going to be a fit for you because, if they're willing to ease into it like that with you and then gradually grow your spend, there's just a lot less risk there too. And then just ask them if they're plugged into ActiveProspect and some of those things too, just the trusted form consents, just some easy high level questions. And if they say no, probably should hang up.
Run.
So, yeah,
I would say run.
Right. Don't walk, run.
I'd say if you imagine too that you're advertising for your own law firm from the website, you would be checking the content. You're going to want trusted form on your web forms. So you should be asking for those things from whoever you're working with, just like you were putting it on your own website. And if they can't provide it to you, that's a red flag. But also work with someone trusted like Andy and other reputable vendors in the space and get other attorneys' perspective. There's a lot of people that will come in and out of this industry we've seen over the years that don't understand the complexity of legal, and they can move out of the industry just as quick as they came in. We saw a lot of solar come in for a while that had this segment of legal. And so I'd say work with people that have a good reference in the legal space, Yeah.
And depending on what state you're in too, I mean, outside of the, vendors association that Cason has too, is that, let's say you're in Florida, a lot of the lead providers or all of them should be really registered as a referral service. Even if they're not a referral service, they are a marketer, but in the eyes of the state of Florida, they're a referral service. So if they're not registered there and you don't see the name of that marketing company come up for the state of Florida, it's probably not compliant, or they just don't, care enough to register and do things like that. So checking some lists like that is an easy thing to do too. So,
yeah. And well, this leads me to another anonymous question. Are legal firms being more aggressive in outbound marketing, inheriting obvious compliance risk, or is it more of an inbound driven industry?
Outbound marketing, I would need.
Are you talking about like taking more marketing in house and not working with lead generators? Are you saying that, like ramping up their own?
Yeah,
I would say overall, I don't know if this answers the question, but some of these marketing conferences I go to that are more general, like less legal focused. So just a lot of digital marketers, is that you're starting to see law firms themselves show up to all these conferences. You never saw it before. So they're getting very aggressive. I'm not going to name them by name, but I know a law firm that's up in Michigan that's doing a lot of co-registration type leads, which is like, bottom the barrel type stuff, but they have the intake set up and they have the AI set up to qualify and things like that. Is there risk? Absolutely. But is that the definition of law firms becoming very aggressive in the marketing space? For sure.
Yeah. Last anonymous question. What advice would you give to marketers or law firms who aren't taking compliance risk seriously?
They probably won't be in business for very long.
I would say make sure you have deep pockets and get ready to write some checks.
Yeah, find a backup profession would be my advice.
It's changing so fast, especially just this week is when that the McCason-McLaughlin news came out and challenging the Hobbs Act and what's going on with the districts interpreting the TCPA. But then you also had Texas that came out with, I think they call it the mini TCPA. And, I follow a lot of the TCPA world stuff. If you don't follow TCPA world, you probably should, because you can at least know what's going on at any given moment. But that had to do with treble damages and mental anguish within the TCPA. So somebody saying they had mental anguish over receiving texts and things like that. And so now you're putting a multiplier in what they can ask for. So these things that might be like a $1,500 per call fine could now be, 3 or 4 times that. And so, if they're not paying attention, they could get hit with a massive lawsuit, even doing a minimal amount of marketing.
Well, and I think it's important to note for the legal industry, there have been multiple cases. They've tried one that I believe became certified as a class, which is the biggest concern in TCPA. There haven't been too many examples in the legal industry yet. Hopefully there's not. But lawyers who are not the marketing company, because their name is on the retainer going out the door, have been hit with TCPA suits that the marketing company did. This is very common. I mean, we've seen this multiple times where the law firms get drug into this and they're not even the one marketing. And I've seen this happen with multiple firms. I've seen it happen with multiple marketing companies. And I think that it's something to be aware of, especially if your retainer is going out the door or they're using your name or they're calling to your call center. They will come after you if you have a deeper pocket than the marketing company. Just know that.
Yeah. And when we talk about known litigators too, everyone thinks attorneys, right? Like a known litigator is this attorney that's filing lawsuits against other attorneys. Known litigators is also your random guy that lives in Wisconsin that watch these YouTube videos, because they do exist. Keep in mind, it teaches them how to go through and try to trap people into TCPA lawsuits. Some might be legit, they say they're the victim even though they're initiating it, but they can set up proxies and make it look like where they filled out this lead that the IP was, sort of in the same city, but not where they were. And then they claim they never filled it out and that they're on the DNC and that you should have never called them. And then you get paperwork where they say, hey, it's usually a low increment type thing where they say, I want $3,000 or something, anything small claims where they know you'll just pay to go away. But those people exist everywhere. And that group is growing. And so you're going to from a time perspective, even you'll get bothered by those people and it could be costly. And so you've got to be very careful.
Yeah. And Andy, that's a good point, because I think a lot of times law firms get those smaller demand letters for like $3,000 and they pay it and it goes away. They think it go away, but it's a dog whistle to the rest of the people in that community. Like, hey, this law firm, if you send a demand letter, they will settle quickly. And that's a quick way to make, $3,000.
I would say most,
like ransomware.
The TCPA trolls are not lawyers. And I would say there's 112,000 names on our litigator scrub list, or 112,000 phone numbers. I would say 90% are not lawyers, or maybe more. I would venture to say. But I would also say if you did nothing wrong, fight every single one of them. Because it's an underground community. They communicate, and you will just start getting demand after demand after demand.
Yep. And they use Chat GPT. I mean, they're not lawyers, so it'll look very, you can tell. I mean, obviously we could tell that it is, but every single correspondence is in some sort of drip where they'll send it out to people and say, this is, they progress everything. I mean, they see the whole outline on how to do this online. So it's very easy for them to respond to every single type thing where they're trying to shake you down. So, but yeah, to Cason's point, you got to fight it. Otherwise it's just going to keep growing because there's a lot out there.
So. Yeah. All right. Perfect.
And that's why you need the trusted form certs and everything like that. So you just show up and say, hey,
you need to have an ActiveProspect account. So where you have the ability to get the trusted form script to place that on your landing pages or your website. And so you're able to document proof of opt-in.
Yeah. So law firms can easily just slap that script right up, in days to just themselves outside of their their legal marketing they do outside of that site. So,
and I don't want to downplay, but check it out. If you're not using trusted form, I would encourage you. It's not as expensive as you're going to think.
It's not. And
I promise you, I think you're making a big mistake if you're not doing it and you're not requiring your vendors to do it. When Earl, when we first looked at it, I thought years ago, it seemed like it was going to be this big, costly thing. And I'm telling you, we require any exclusive partners we have get on it. They have no problem doing it. It's a no-brainer. It's the only service I know of in the legal industry anymore. I believe the other companies have left the legal industry, from what I understand.
Yeah, Jernaya abandoned legal. Yep,
they did.
You need it. It's the most surefire way to protect yourself. 100% is the most surefire way. And you're also, just a quick note, you're fighting for safe harbor when it comes to TCPA. You need to have all your records in place. You need to have all your call suppressions in place. Safe harbor is outlined on the FCC.gov. Go take a look at it. And you need to be able to show all those things because that caps liability if something does happen. And it talks about how you can make a mistake, and court systems have ruled in favor of companies that can show that they were doing the things correctly. Trusted form is one of the most proven ways for one of those 5 steps to prove that you are doing things correctly.
Yeah, and if you don't have ActiveProspect as well as a platform, that you're doing case management in, you can't even begin to look at, the buzzword of the year, AI. AI is you can't even begin to do things like that because you need that entire ecosystem to feed into each other so that you can start automating documents. You can start doing sort of things and referring cases out to other law firms. Like the entire ecosystem, what allows you to do that, not only from a technology perspective, but from a compliance perspective. So you also don't want to refer a case that originated with a TCPA violation to another attorney. So
Right.
like there's a lot there to unpack, but yeah.
All right, perfect. This actually leads us into our next poll question. What is your primary lead source today? Are we looking at Google Ads, paid search, SEO, organic traffic, Facebook, Insta, referral partners, third-party lead vendors, or other?
For us, if I had to, it's different by campaign. Every campaign is going to be different, and we try to keep what we call a line in the water on every ethical source throughout all of our campaigns because sometimes things shift around. I would say that it's definitely meta though across the board. But I will tell you, depending on the audience, depending on who you're going after, there's some that your more traditional mediums are over 50% of our spend on those, and so as a whole, it's meta. But again, measure, or you can't manage what you can't measure. Measure it, and it's going to be different by case type, I promise. And if you just work backwards and say, if I was my prospect, where are their eyes at the ball is going to be? And talk to some of your clients. Say, hey, what are you using for mediums? But it's going to be different. The only reason I'm hesitant to say meta is for us across the board it is, but I can tell you there's case types where it's not even 10% of our spend on that case type. And so just be careful with getting locked into medium too much and be more diligent on who is my target audience and how do I measure my marketing.
Yeah, and maybe that's where the conversion took place. But in all those webinars with Neil Patel in particular, he screams omni-channel, that you've got to be everywhere, and then he says it's like between 10 and I want to say a dozen touch points before they make a determination of a sale or a conversion to hire that attorney or whatever that marketer wants. Is so maybe that person, maybe Broughton was marketing on Meta, but also Instagram and Google and some other things. And then they did the conversion on Facebook because they had that was that 9th or 10th touch point where they finally pulled the trigger.
Yeah,
so you've got to be everywhere.
It's a great point, but I think that if you're measuring these things, you can get better at these things, and really, it's going to be different based off of who you're advertising for. It really is.
Yeah, well,
based for us, what practice area? You got to think demographics too. Is that when you get into the SSDI environment, which is one we do, you're really talking a very tight age group of, let's say, 51 to 64 is really like your prime, or 63, like is your prime group. And so are more of those people on Meta? Sure. So like you got to think that through too, is you just could be blindly throwing ads against the wall of somebody who would never convert simply based on their age.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the poll results show that, Google ads and paid search are at 50%. Third-party lead vendors are 33%. And Facebook and Insta at 17%.
Interesting.
So something to think about. Okay, let's move along. So as we look at, we covered so much about compliance, impact of regulations as it relates to TCPA, on legal marketing. Call centers need to tweak and capture further consent on their outreach for inbounds. Andy, could you talk to a little bit about
a lot of this was
as it relates to inbound?
Yeah, I don't know how familiar the audience is with one-to-one consent, but that was like the biggest talking point is like, was one-to-one consent going to happen? And that's where you're going through a lead form and you're saying, hey, I'm going to talk to Joe Smith Law Firm. And they click and say, yes, I want to talk to Joe Smith Law Firm. That didn't happen. You can be more, broad now, but what didn't go away is just the consent and the ability to basically reach back out to that person. So let's say they originate as a phone call. You have no electronic consent for that person who originated as a phone call. So when they call into our call center, some of our recent changes is that they do get a text that says, I need permission to reach back out to you, as well as the law firm to reach back out to you, just after this point, because maybe that call drops. So you can't call them back. And so you need that consent. And if they're calling on a landline, we ask them, is there a mobile number that we can text to gather this electronic consent? If they say no, the call's over with. I mean, it's done. We just don't mess with it. And so things like that, if you want to further protect yourself, you should put checks like that in place with the inbound callers in particular, because if it ever comes up where you need electronic consent, at least you have it. So, and that's where a lot of the trolls will trap you too, as on those calls or those transfers or however they take place. But they'll try to get you there. So I would recommend doing that.
Okay, cool. And actually, we have a anonymous question from one-to-one consent requirement taken in effect with the McLaughlin to the mini TCPA in Texas. If you had to look into a crystal ball, what does TCPA landscape looks like in the next 5 years? Andy?
I mean, it's tough because, for companies like us and Broughton that are following all the rules the best we can and probably even being overly conservative, is that it's probably going to get, closer to where we're at right now. But I'd say, who knows when you're allowing, I guess it's a good and a bad thing. If you're allowing the states to interpret the TCPA on the district level as opposed to the FCC, is that you could see a lot of differentiation from state to state. You're already starting to see it. So I'd say if, within 5 years, you might just have a lot more states that are more restrictive. But there's no one size fits all. So I'd say it just could be moved more in that direction. And, is one-to-one consent, quote unquote, dead right now? Like technically, but I think a form of it, will come about. I think that'll continue to just evolve through these, potentially through the states. So,
and the one-to-one consent thing is really interesting. Going back to the ABA laws earlier, it's, follow what does your state say needs to be on your ads first, right?
Yep.
And I can tell you that we've always been one-to-one consent, because that was not a change for us, because we only have us on there. They're checking the box saying we only have our law firm on there, the Goldwater Law Firm. But everybody should just be thinking about the fact that the one-to-one is kind of already in play for the legal industry because of what your state bar says.
Yeah. And it just makes for a better experience for the customer, right? So that they know that Andy's particular law firm is actually contacting them as opposed to another law firm.
Yeah. And I know we're very TCPA focused here, but just because you're TCPA compliant, I mean, to Cason's point, doesn't mean your legal advertising guidelines of a particular state bar compliant.
Right.
Even it comes down to just like we said, registering in Florida, but the ad itself. I mean, if I just go to Meta, and I want to call anybody out in particular, but there are some marketers out there, particularly in the MBA space, that are saying, contact us and, you'll get a payment wired to you within minutes for auto accidents. And last time I checked, that there's still no ACHs and wires involved with, they still go the old school route of checks. And so, already, it's fraudulent. And so you got to be really careful, because you can get slapped by the bar, not just the TCPA, type situation. So,
yeah. We have one more anonymous question. What are some of the biggest risks with AI chatbots on a firm's website to try and help convert visitors?
That's an interesting one.
I know that's, yeah.
I'm not our CMO, and just enough to be dangerous on this. I'm sure our compliance officer has weighed in on this. I'm sure that we have opinions on this. I'm just not educated on this to talk about it right this second, but would be happy to get with our team, whoever this person is, and follow up if you're looking for an answer.
Yeah, I'll give a general answer on AI is that, if you're using it to qualify leads and it's a chatbot on your own site or something like that, same rules would apply in what you're saying in the ad itself. Don't say that in the chat that we're going to get you $1 million. We just got this case, and, make any promises, and, eliminate superlatives and all sorts of qualifications, and just figure out, what their situation is and ask them a standard question flow. And to my point earlier is that anything AI, especially as it relates to, just the calls itself and everything, all that's regulated under the same TCPA framework. There's no separate regulation for that. So, it's still going to roll into your state bar advertising regulations and, the FCC itself. So
what I will say about the chatbot real quick is one thing's for sure is if the chatbot gets to a place where they say, yes, I would like a phone call, you still have to get express written consent in some shape, form, or fashion through that chat, or ask them to submit the web lead. I know that has been talked about.
Yes. If you're going to make that outbound dial.
Remove that just because they were having a chat with someone. So I think it's different on the chatbot, but it still applies. Express written consent. Make sure you have it. Trusted form.
Absolutely.
I know we're coming up close to time, and I really wanted to touch on risk mitigation checklists. What are some of the things that law firms can do to mitigate TCPA risk, and really just highlight, 5 essential best practices every organization should follow to stay protected and minimize risk. I think the first one we will talk about is obtain clear and documented consent. And what that looks like, first, is the strongest line of defense is a prior express written consent, which must be clear. Use plain, unambiguous language, disclose who would be contacting the consumer and why, and ensure the consumer explicitly agrees to be contacted via phone, text, or any sort of pre-recorded messaging. If your consent process is vague or inconsistent, you're opening the door to lawsuits. I think the second point that we want to touch on is keeping meticulous records. You can't prove compliance without proof. So that's why it's important to have a service like ActiveProspect with Trusted Form in conjunction with Verify, so you can verify that the proper TCPA language was obtained when that consumer opted in. So maintain organized, accessible records, consent forms with clear agreement action to notice disclosure languages, call and text logs, opt-out timestamps and confirmation, and lead source detail. If a claim is filed, your best defense will include detailed documentation. And again, detailed documentation is in a form of using ActiveProspect's Trusted Form, right?
Yeah.
Third,
and sorry to interrupt you here, Earl, real quick, is that revocation of consent is also going to be key. So just because you have that initial consent, at some point through reasonable means, even if somebody's not saying stop or unsubscribe, if they say anything to the point of do not contact me ever again, anything that's reasonable is going to count as revocation of consent. So you got to follow that as well. But go on.
Awesome. Third, scrub all leads against the DNC list. In this step, it's a non-negotiable. Scrub all your contact list against the national DNC, state-specific DNC list, your company internal DNC list, R&D reassigned number database services. Failing to do so is one of the fastest ways to end up in court, or even one of the easiest mistakes to avoid. 4, train your sales and marketing team. Compliance can't be soil. Make TCPA awareness part of your company culture, including TCPA guidelines in employee onboarding, holding regular compliance training, requiring checklists, reviews before launching campaigns. And remember, one uninformed employee can trigger a lawsuit for the entire company. And lastly, implemented Trusted Form. We cannot stress that, enough. This was the whole premise of our entire webinar is don't rely on third-party assurances or outdated screenshots. Join the thousands of businesses that use Trusted Form today to document proof of consent with every lead. With Trusted Form businesses, it helps mitigate TCPA risk and avoid outreach to consumers without proper consent. And then Verify helps, document the fact that you are verifying the proper consent language and its authenticity.
Agreed.
And that's it. We are out of time. Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
my guests, for attending. Thank you for our attendees. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me and our panel on LinkedIn. And we look forward to seeing you guys at our next webinar.
You can